So why don't we talk about what the dialectic is and what it is not, okay? One of the crude distortions you'll hear from critics of Marxism, they will say that dialectics is the belief that change only comes through conflict and violence. That is a crude oversimplification. The dialectic goes back to Hegel. It was Hegel, and it goes back even further, right? I mean, you can talk about Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, right, that said you never step into the same river twice. But the philosopher Hegel argued that history was being advanced forward, and that what drove history forward was contradiction. That was when there are things that cannot coexist with each other, ideas that are incompatible with each other, they clash. They contradict each other and they clash. And this clash of ideas is called a dialectic, right? And that there is first a thesis. And the thesis contends with a synthesis, the thesis contends with an antithesis. And the thesis and the antithesis clash and they create a synthesis. And then the synthesis becomes the new thesis, and there becomes a new antithesis, and they clash, and they produce a new synthesis, and that is how history advances. Hegel saw this primarily in the realm of ideas, right? There was ideas that were clashing. Karl Marx took Hegel's understanding of dialectics and combined it with Greek materialism and the understanding that all that exists in the world is matter. And he took materialism, all that exists that is matter, and combined it with dialectics and said that all that exists is matter, but that matter is constantly in a state of motion and change. And the way Marxists have generally articulated, I've said this many times on these lives, is A does not equal A. A does not equal A, right? This first A can never be the same as the second A. The world is constantly in a state of change. That is the nature of dialectical and historical materialism. Dialectical materialism is A does not equal A. That all that exists in the world is matter, but that matter is constantly in a state of change, and it is through the conflict and the contradictions that those changes happen. Now, historical materialism argues that the advance of human history has come through class struggle, that classes struggling against each other is what brings about historical progress, that is the underlying economic base that is the clash. It's not simply these ideas don't just float down from the sky, that there is an economic underlying component to these ideas, that the ideas of the bourgeoisie that toppled feudalism didn't just come down from the sky. The ideas of the bourgeoisie came from their class position, and the feudal lords and aristocrats, their ideas came from their class position. And the bourgeoisie and the feudal lords clashed because one economic interest was on one side and another economic interest was on another side, and they clashed, and out of that came the modern world and capitalism, right? And that this is dialectics, and that's what the dialectical method is. All righty. And who will win the Super Bowl from a Marxist perspective? Oh boy. I talked a little bit about the Super Bowl earlier. Glad it's on the list. All right, next question.